Hello, welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I am live today with Leo Zagami. It's an honor to have him return today. I thought we would dive a little bit deeper. Last time we kind of did a bit of an overview. We talked about some of his books, and I thought today there are two topics I had in mind, but those of you who are familiar with my show know how this goes, where we kind of go where it goes. But I thought we would dive a little bit deeper into how these secret societies actually work, how they all relate to each other, how they work through some of the industries, the intelligence apparatus. And we have the perfect person to explain all of this to us today. And I also thought if we have time, I would love to cover his father was a Jungian psychologist, and those of you who are familiar with my channel know I recently started a new show called Cryptid History Uncrypted, and the first series of that show is unveiling the occult, esoteric roots of the field of psychology, social science, psychiatry, and so he has a lot of knowledge in that arena as well. So I thought,
yes, I would like to just tell you he was a psychiatrist, which in terms of difference between a psychologist is simply also a medical doctor. So
sure.
It has, let's say, even more defined academic role, let's say, in the work that he does, even if at one point of his career he decided to abandon psychiatry altogether because of the manipulation game that was played. Of course, psychology, it's inherently also part of this game, which is played by the big foundations like the Rockefeller Foundation or the big pharma establishment that has behind the scenes established this whole, let's say, how you want to call it, a therapy that, of course, in theory should help patients, but in reality often cages them within also the use that is often encouraged of medicines. Now, you showed me before we started the Jung psychiatry. Jung psychiatry, in theory, should never use any form of medicines because it relies on a more natural approach. However, having said that, I saw through friends of my father that wasn't always the case, as big pharma has gradually corrupted even the most orthodox Jung psychiatrists or psychologists. So it's, of course, a way, like I said, to cage people in a system. And in Volume 8 of my Confessions, I explained the role that in all this the Tavistock Institute had right from the start in kind of crafting and molding our society and intervening whereby there is some kind of disruption. And that's when, unfortunately, people like me or others who tend to become then, let's say, problematic for the system get locked up and at times even tortured. This is sad, but it didn't only happen in the Soviet Union or back in the days when the Soviet Union was using this type of option for all political dissidents. It happened, unfortunately, also here in the West, and it happened in a much more silent way, and so we will never really know all the damage that was done, but we know today there is definitely all over our society a abuse of drugs, of medical substances that are encouraged way too much by the big pharma establishment. So thank you for addressing this topic, definitely. And we might, of course, if we have time, go back on it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Before we dive in, I just want to make address two things. The first thing is that I do have the Dono chat linked, and we can cover those questions at the end, just because it's hard for me to read everything and have a conversation at the same time. So we'll do that at the end. And we will also be playing a little bit of a promo for those of you who are familiar with my work. Know that I'm doing an event. It's called Rebels for Cause. It's the Cause Fest. And it is creative artists uniting for the sovereignty of everyone. It is an artist for liberty type event because, unfortunately, the entertainment industry has been infiltrated and used for the purposes of propaganda. And we have so many incredibly talented, creative people who are on the side of pro-humanity, freedom. And I always say that the biggest antidote to their agenda, which I believe is the transhuman leading to the post-human world, controlled by an AI high-born mind that they program, is to be radically human. And one of the things that makes human beings unique and so incredibly exceptional, I believe, is that they are creative beings. So I want to showcase that in the name of freedom, personal sovereignty, and pro-humanity. So I'll have that link afterwards and a little promo all about that. And without further ado, let's we can continue. But let's do you want to start with the topic of psychology? I wanted to address one thing you were saying.
No, well, I think that first of all, it was interesting to start as we are also discussing the subject of secret societies to understand in the collective psyche what these secret societies really are, because they are a phenomenon of great antiquity, and the characteristics of it are very diverse depending on the topic that the secret society has been established for. Might it be religion, politics, magic, hermeticism. So I think that within the realm of secret societies, then we have societies with secrets like Freemasonry, because everybody really knows Freemasonry, and so it's not really a secret society per se.
Well, I just want to show you, right? This is on the cover of Hearst magazine, and then I have this. Where is it? Oh, I think here, right here. And this is on the cover of Life magazine. These are very mainstream publications. So yes, you are correct. These secret, quote unquote, secret societies are not so secret. Especially,
well, I mean, there is a lot of talk.
How they work may be very secret, right? That's what people don't know.
Well, that's why in volume 1 of my confessions, I included a secret file which really defines the theory and typology of all secret societies. And it describes how these societies, of course, are classified. The religious society, maybe a religious secret society, the political secret society, the Society of Occult Movement, Panfinalist societies. It's all very technical the way these societies are established. Of course, some of them at the top then tend to reunify even the ones below that are apparently fighting with each other. And then on top of that, we have the occult manipulators that are mainly two in our present society. The Sabbatean Frankists, which are part of the Jewish heresy that's been going on since Shabbatai Zevi and then Jacob Frank. And then we have the Jesuits, which are in itself a secret society, the way they are built within. Of course, exteriorly, everybody knows the classic image of the Jesuit that teaches, that is good, that is a man of intellectual, a scientist. But in reality, then we have the Jesuits of the fourth vow, the ones completely dedicated to the Pope, and those ones are the ones that actually work within the intelligence establishment of the Vatican. And I described in volume 3 in particular the work that was conducted by a guy called Robert Graham, who used to be the head of the Vatican Secret Service, and he was a Jesuit. But also I described the importance of the Jesuits within secret societies, but also within the realm of intelligence. You talked at the beginning about discussing intelligence agencies. I think that there will not be such things without the Jesuits. First of all, because the Jesuits inspired Queen Elizabeth I to resist with John Dee, who identified himself as 007, and was the first one in history. And so we start, almost 500 years ago with a confrontation between the Protestant and the Catholic world that, of course, required spies, information gathering. But then we can say that actually spying and gathering intelligence is something that also comes from the remote antiquity, because we have even in the Bible sometimes some drops of what the intelligence, even a primitive form, was. And so intelligence gathering these days is conducted by intelligence services that often are put together by the elite, but also especially by the Jesuits in the universities. In volume 1 of my confession, I show how, just to give an example, one of the many universities that trains people for the CIA here in the US operates, works, what kind of books they require for reading and studying and all that. And then further on in my confessions, in volume 3 in particular, I explain how at Spezia, where is the birthplace of Ignazio Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, became in the last few hundred years now the depository of what is known as the biggest archive that apparently is bigger than the one in Langley, Virginia. So the Jesuits have played a central role in molding the international intelligence establishment in a way, just as their opposition, because if you think about it, like I said, without the arrival of the Jesuits in a scene, which was, of course, a scene of great problems initially with the reform, then you had the counter-reformation, you had the people that religiously were rebelling the diktat of Rome, but at the same time, then it became not only a religious problem, but it became also a political problem, as the various monarchs were joining into this Protestant faction. And so the Jesuits were accepted by the church with that sanctioned their birth in 1540. The way they came together was because Ignazio Loyola, who had been arrested previously by the Inquisition, so he wasn't really like, a saint in the traditional way. He used to hypnotize women, young women and other people, and he was well known for his occult practice, but he offered the Pope, he made the Pope an offer he couldn't refuse, as if you want to use a kind of Godfather terminology. And the offer was taken by the Pope, who knew that the church at the time had great problems in counteracting what was happening with the Protestant world. And so they became the depositories of all the intelligence that is also gathered through the sacrament of confession, because they can't be a more revelatory sacrament than confession. You are trusting all your most intimate secrets with the priest, and that was and is probably still is to some extent still passed on to the Jesuits, that can then verify and use it for their own political and geopolitical gain. The Jesuits of the fourth vow are not really Christians. They give their belief to a concept which is to do whatever it takes to protect the papacy and to further the cause of the church. So it's not really Christianity, it's something else.
Right.
So, they arrived right at the beginning of their story. They arrived in Asia. Then from Macau, they spread from Macau to India, to China. In China in particular, they have hundreds and hundreds of years of being there and being trusted even by emperors. And to this day, they have a shrine in Beijing to Matteo Riccio. They have a church, the first church that the Jesuits managed to establish right at the center, was right at the beginning of this 17th century, and then in 1703 they had even a basilica erected. So their history goes back hundreds of years. Before then, of course, the Vatican existed. So people would say, but before 1540, what did the Vatican use for their intelligence? Let's say that intelligence prior to that was carried on by the Dominicans, but before them by the Knights Templars. The Knights Templars were removed, were sanctioned as being heretics and outlaws, and of course had to interrupt their official work for their church. And at that point, of course, there was a vacuum in the church. And that's why Ignazio Loyola was quick to offer the Pope to fill up that vacuum, because only with an order that was military as well as religious, they could really counteract the Reformation. Regarding instead another old intelligence school, of course, I mentioned earlier Elizabeth I, John Dee, the British, the English in particular, have been at the basis. The foundation of intelligence gathering is very well known. And then, of course, in the last, since the end of the Second World War, with Ian Fleming's books, has taken a connotation which is also a little bit, show business, the way they portray the James Bond figure. So the way that intelligence services and secret societies interact is mostly because a society that, of course, is secretive, its sect can be used for many things. Still to this day, the CIA uses a lot of these sects in the New Age movement to infiltrate even foreign countries. You might be in Mexico in a New Age shop, looks all nice and fancy, and in reality, behind the scenes,
and it's all love and light, right?
Yeah, but maybe it's a CIA operative just posing that way because they want to cover up other things that are much more dangerous. They maybe portray themselves as Rosicrucians or this or that. Now, also, when it comes down to Freemasonry, we have very much a complex reality filled up with degrees and rights. You have the basic 3 degrees that are basically the foundation, the ground, but then you have these rights, and these rights become then the territory in which the intelligence services can operate. So at times, certain rights have been fought because they were not controlled by a specific intelligence agency. For example, the Memphis and Mizraim never really managed to be regularized here in America because it was always seen as opposing their main right, which is the ancient and accepted Scottish right, which is, however, controlled, of course, by the American military industrial complex and intelligence community. So they did, in certain countries where, for example, Freemasonry is relevant also because of the rights, like in Italy, there was actually an internal war in Freemasonry in which American Freemasons were opposing in every way possible the expansion of certain rights of Freemasonry because maybe they were controlling others. And the same can be said within the realms of secret societies. They tend to infiltrate them so they can then use them and monitor them constantly. This happened very much with the Ordo Templi Orientis, who sprang out of the Illuminati over 100 years ago in Austria and Germany. And then, of course, Germany became the place where the rise of Nazism was connected to secret societies like the Thule Gesellschaft, but or Gesellschaft, I don't know, the pronunciation always, when it comes to German, is not always clear for me. But the actual work that was done by the secret societies laid the foundation then for the Nazi takeover, that's for sure. I mean, that is a whole big topic that I touch at the end of volume 1. I touch certain elements of it, but it's definitely a very complex subject, in which I actually also talk more in Invisible Master about, because Invisible Master, as well as volume 4, but in particular Invisible Master, I discuss how the SS were really working within the realms of secret societies and so on to gather, like I also point out in volume 1, these holy relics, a bit like we see in Indiana Jones, to then, of course, use them for their own occult means.
Right.
But so there is also, I notice within the intelligence community, a fascination with holy relics.
Yeah.
And this is something that doesn't involve only the occult, but it involves also geopolitical interests. At times, for example, relic of so not only holy, let's say also relics like, I don't know, a treasure in an old Spanish ship, for example, that has sunk somewhere in some island and then suddenly becomes an important and something of importance, also for the intelligence agency, because when you're talking about billions of dollars, then it becomes a topic of interest.
Yeah.
Money drives everything, of course, and at times in the intelligence services, people without many morals or any scruple, they simply choose to either sell their information or either use their information to gather and make more money. Maybe they have some privileged information regarding the stock market, or we discuss often the problem of politicians in Washington that do this. I just make an example: Nancy Pelosi and her husband, just to mention one, but there's many others, and on both factions of the political realm. However, nobody really discusses the amount of money that is done by intelligence operatives within the stock market, because that is something that we completely are, it's not unveiled to the public, it's not made, so that is something. When I wrote volume 8, I also wanted to explain how the military industrial complex and the intelligence operatives, at times, of course, like we said, often linked to secret societies that we commonly refer as the Illuminati, manipulate and control Hollywood. The example of the Entertainment Liaison Office, ELO, that exists since the end of the 30s. They even have an office in Hollywood, and they basically edit and control every single topic that is discussed in movies that, of course, portray in any way the military industrial complex. So they have their own say. When it comes to secret societies, though, secret societies have this, the fact that they have this extreme secrecy, the fact that there is different kinds of secret societies that so it's quite rather flexible. It makes it an ideal place for the intelligence services to operate with. And Freemasonry, like, for example, when it came to the recognition in the 90s, early 90s, they made this. There was a big problem in 1993 in Italian Freemasonry. The mafia had become really endemic, as it still is, unfortunately. The United Lodge of England decided to send their own emissary to Italy. And this guy went in a specific lodge. He used to, I think, work for an oil company or something as a cover-up, but he was an intelligence operative, and the whole thing was connected. And there was a schism that now apparently the United Lodge of England wants to, in the last month, they have announced they want to recognize again the Grand Orient of Italy. But it's always to do with the intelligence thing. It's to do because the recognition stands there also as a facilitator in this time of war with Ukraine, in Ukraine with Russia. It becomes, an alliance which is Masonic as well as military.
Our CIA fighting a proxy war with Russia, right?
Yeah, but then when you have a war of any kind, I'm not talking about only the CIA, but any kind of intelligence agency can be also.
Right. I was just using that as an example.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Public knowledge, since like 2014, possibly earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and in fact, yes.
Training the Nazis that in Ukraine, the Azov Battalion. Right?
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about secret societies in Ukraine, I made recently an article on leozagami.com where I discuss of how there was a number of secret societies that were created to establish, first of all, artificially the identity of the Ukrainians. This happened over 2 centuries ago because they were part of the Russian Empire, and suddenly there were secret societies that were fomenting this identity, and there were various secret societies that did this. The Malorus, I think one was called the Malorus Brotherhood. Then there was another one dedicated to the Orthodox saints, but that didn't really live long because the religious thing didn't interest really very much Freemasons and the Illuminati. They are fighting most of the time, established the religion in one way or another. Sadly, that is the faction that unfortunately has taken over Freemasonry. But when it came to Ukraine, at one point in the 90s, when George Soros established his first open society in Kiev, immediately after, they established also the kind of reawoke this link with this International Order of Saint Stanislaus. Now, the Order of Saint Stanislaus was a very old imperial Russian order. But at one point, the Polish had some kind of schism within it. They created a faction, basically, that unifies Polish military industrial complex and politicians with the Ukrainian ones. It became so dangerous for the Russian influenced politicians that they proposed in 2003, the people behind Yanukovych that then led to the presidency of Yanukovych had proposed to ban this order, this Masonic order, because it is a Masonic order. And I met their Grand Master in the I think it was 2003, 4. I met for the first time their Grand Master. It's such a long time ago. Of course, I'm trying to have, but he was called Stephen Turner. Stephen Turner. I think I met him even before that. But what happened was this: Stephen Turner became the Grand Master of this International Order of Saint Stanislaus, that of course receives financing from George Soros behind the scenes. It became extremely influential. He was he was actually very prepared as a Freemason. He wasn't only prepared geopolitically or politically. He was actually somebody who knew a lot about the history, the occult history of Freemasonry. He himself was very much into the Egyptian rites, all kinds of things. And this guy, Stephen Turner, I remember because I met him in a lodge. Then, as it goes, I met him a few times after. And then he invited me, I remember, to preside over a Masonic meeting of this Grand Lodge of the Union in Italy, that he was also at the time Grand Master. It was a schism that was created after this recognition of the UGLE, whatever. It's too complicated now to go in all the things of it. But I discovered that basically this guy was a member of the MI6, CIS, the British intelligence. And so it was very clear for me what the whole plan of action was there. At the time, of course, I was, I up until 2006, I was in very good terms with all the Masonic factions and what you define as the Illuminati. So I had no problem in having this relationship with him. And I remember that there was a lot of talk about the Orange Revolution, this, that, and all the other. So, it was like secret societies can become tools. And it was, in this case, the International Order of Saint Stanislaus that became so influential that actually the symbols that now you see for the ground forces of Ukraine are the symbols of the Order of Saint Stanislaus. the cross with those swords and everything. That is the emblem of the Order of St. Stanislaus. So it's actually like the whole. And when they did that dignity revolution, I don't know if you remember, that led to the 2014, in Kiev, the dignity revolution became, well, when they did the dignity revolution, people don't know that, because of course the revolution of dignity is seen as, liberation from the Russian oppression and all that BS. In reality, the dignity order, you can go on the internet and find it yourself. You just put Giuliano Di Bernardo dignity order, and then you put Giuliano Di Bernardo Academy of the Illuminati. He's a Grand Master since 2002, and he actually has an order called Dignity, so that operates in Ukraine, out of all places, where he actually had an important speech before the Revolution of Dignity. So, I mean, how many coincidences you are? I mean, so when this Maidan revolution, Ukrainian revolution of dignity took place at the beginning of 2014, it was actually orchestrated with the help of this Italian Grandmaster, who himself had been until the late 90s, the Grand Master of one of the main Italian factions recognized by the United Lodge of England, of Freemasonry. Then in 2002, he established himself with an order called, with the Academy of the Illuminati. He actually opened an Academy of the Illuminati in Rome. So,
and when was this?
In 2002. And then soon after, he opened this knighthood called Dignity Order, which is a knighthood, which is like the external circle of the Academy of the Illuminati. Because often you ask me how the secret societies operate. They operate with an external secret society that
network, right? Like a web.
Well, no, it's like a way of exposing something, so then you don't take the heat. And then in the center you have maybe a core member.
Rings on ring structure, right?
Yeah, and very compartmentalized. And so then in the center you have those people who really manage real power, while more you go out towards, the more it becomes like a social thing, and then you arrive to the average Freemason that you have here in America that knows nothing about anything that we are discussing here, because they don't simply have this kind of experience. They go to their lodge to help, apparently, or first of all, know themselves and learn something on how they should become better human beings, if that's possible still within Freemasonry. And then later on, of course, they might also participate in some social activities to help this hospital, this church, this and that, within the community. This is how Freemasons operate, let's say, commonly here in the US. But they will tell you, when they read maybe, a book like this about the money, Masons and occultism, and the decline of the Catholic Church, they will be like, really? Well, really, yes. In fact, really, yes. I put actually two, when I talk, also documents to confirm all this. So, the documents are signed, sealed, and everything. So, I mean, then, they, at times, a lot of them are surprised about the corruption that goes on in certain quarters of Freemasonry themselves. But Freemasonry is not the only secret society. There is secret societies that are much more secretive. Some of them are almost unknown to us because they use a variety of names. Right. And the ones who are at the center, like we said, the circles, but the ones who are at the center are the only ones who really know the real maybe name of this structure or its mission. It's a little bit also the pyramid, because we said circles, but at times it's also a pyramid structure in which, you have a couple, often the hierarchy is a pyramid in Freemasonry, but also in any secret society of the West is often a pyramid.
This is what Adam Weishaupt talked about, how he used the hierarchical structure and he modeled it off of the Jesuits, because he was...
Well, yeah, I mean, he was himself a student of the Jesuits, came from a Jesuit university, the University of Ingolstadt. It was a moment in history in which the Jesuits had been kicked out of the Vatican in 1773, 1774. They got kicked out. So he was given himself the possibility of teaching in this university, taking basically the place of a Jesuit. But he said he was actually against them. But in reality, he was their ally. In fact, Baron Knig, who walked out of the order, accused them of being such. And he copied, of course, some of the structure. But the revolutionary method of Adam Weishaupt was to add in this very complex initiatic structure of his a political rather than an esoteric mission. So it was unknown for the people below what really were the aims of the people above. They camouflaged also the order as being pro-Christian, as being Christians, because Weishaupt would say, oh, well, the first Illuminati were actually the first Christians. I'm trying to go back to original Christianity. Of course, it was a lie, but their aim in the end was to destroy all established religions, destroy all established monarchies, because monarchies were a reflection of the kingdom of God and had a profound link, all of them, with the churches, either the Orthodox in the case of the Tsar, the Kaiser, the Protestant. I mean, each one had their link with their own church. So destroying these monarchies facilitated in turn, like I explained in volume 7, of course, as you know, at the end of volume 7, that choice of abandoning monarchies in the favor of constitutional monarchies and at times republics, like in France. But then, of course, you eliminate in France, which is the birthplace, some say, of modern democracy. No, we say that democracy was born in ancient Greece, but in reality, the practice of it we can relate with the first. Okay, the Republic of France and what the République, the Fraternité, Égalité, Liberté, now, as we can see from the news, is not really versing in great conditions. I mean, instead than having a king or an emperor, you have Macron, which is more or less a dictator, a camouflaged king that doesn't care about the people and acts just like the last sovereigns in France that ended up, of course, in a very bad way, because we know what happened to them. The actual, though, then there was a substitution. They substituted the last monarch of France for the first emperor of France, which was Napoleon, another guy that came out of nowhere, and everybody says, where is this guy coming out from? He came out from the realm of secret societies. He was apparently not only an emperor in this realm of existence, but also an emperor in the Rosicrucian tradition, and had been initiated by Count Cagliostro, Giuseppe Balsamo, who happens to be also a member of my family, who basically was his initiator and who was the main agent of the Illuminati during the time that preceded the French Revolution, financing. You need money to finance it.
Yeah, these wars are expensive and revolutions are expensive. Revolutions
are expensive. That's why there is a big problem with modern revolutions, and with the main problem is that George Soros has invested so much money only in the revolution that interest him and that can work out in his favor. Like I said, like the one that we just mentioned that happened in Ukraine with the Revolution of Dignity, which of course brought to the resignation of Yanukovych, who in turn, though, like I said, with his politician, tried to eliminate Freemasonry from Ukraine and those secret societies many years prior to that. So, see, in the end, they won.
Right. Yeah, that was the point of Anthony Sutton's book on the Order of Skull and Bones. It was, how they fund both sides, but ultimately, either way, they win, right? Yeah.
Either way, they win, because often they control both sides a little bit, like, and this is a Jesuit teaching and modality that they follow. like I said, the Jesuits are the ones who really direct the inner circles of the Illuminati, the upper echelons of Freemasonry, especially in the Latin American countries and in the continental Freemasonry. They are very influential. The Jesuits, because of the way they're structured, it's very easy for them to, and because they don't really go around, at times they don't go around as priests, they adapt. They go around as Muslims if they are in Islam, they go around as Buddhists if they are in a Buddhist country, they go around, they are opportunists. I mean, right. I can give you an example. Matteo Ricci, who was the first Jesuit who really managed to enter China after some prior attempts that failed, because Chinese didn't accept any foreigners on their territory. He initially, for the first, I think, 12 years, went around as a Buddhist. He portrayed himself as a Buddhist. When he saw that the Buddhist thing didn't really work out with the main authorities, and that he could be he could have a lot more favors and reach much higher levels in the echelon of power in China, becoming a Confucian, a member of a Confucian order, then he ditched Buddhism altogether, and he actually started to write against Buddhism, which started an internal war in China, which said that the Jesuits were opposing Buddhism. But at the same time, the Jesuits struck an alliance with the Confucian, with one of the most powerful Confucian sects in China, that brought them to the emperor, and basically by having this alliance, they also proposed this new form of Christianity mixed with Confucianism in the Vatican. And it started, like I explained in volume 4 of my confession, what is known as the Chinese controversy. It went on for 6 popes, until the last of these 6 popes said, we don't want this Confucian ritual coming inside the Vatican. Because the Jesuits, what they did to manage to become accepted in China, they kind of like flexed a little bit this Christianity, and said that Christianity was actually descending from Confucianism. I mean, it was completely insane what they were proposing.
Wow.
But this is, and then people don't know, Freemasons, of course, know very well, when they enter Freemasonry, you have the first 2 degrees, you have these words, Joachim and Boaz. Joachim and Boaz are the columns of the temple of Solomon, symbolically, allegorically speaking. But they don't know that the initial of this, I and B, it can be also J and B, but it is basically stands for Beato Ignazio, which is a way of praising the founder of the Jesuits. The Jesuits also inspired the 18th degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, making it more Catholic, and rewrote some of the degrees. And this is known even by the valleys of the Scottish Rite. So, I mean, they know very well what I'm talking about here. It's not a conspiracy theory. Right. It's actually Masonic history. And then you have, of course, in this evolution of secret societies, of course, then the occult aspect. And the Jesuits not only are well versed in the geopolitical implications, though they let the Sabbatean Frankists deal with the money side of things, like the Rothschilds. And but when it comes to the occult, well, the occult means energy of an occult nature, which a normal order of priests will not know anything about, but the Jesuits instead are well versed with that. And so, what is their primal goal here? It's gathering this energy. How you gather this energy? This energy usually is of a sexual nature, because it's a sexual magic that most of the secret societies practice in. Because we all know that the actual coming together of a man, a woman, a man of a man, a woman, creates different kind of energies, okay? And so these energies are somehow transliterated into an egregore, which is a thought form, which is established by the reunion of several people together. And they are feeding this egregor, which is basically guarding their lodge, their chapter, their temple, their sect, and they're feeding it with these energies. Now, these energies can be fed in an animist kind of way by sacrificing chickens or animals like they do in voodoo.
Wow.
And I explain very well the connections between voodoo and Freemasonry in my latest book, Volume 8 of my Confessions, by the way. And but the actual energy that is created, because when a man and a woman come together, they are basically generating magnetic energy in the movement. Even this energy is not considered something to just dissipate, or like in the profane world. They decided to gather this energy for a precise. And that's what we have really seen a little bit in fiction, in Eyes Wide Shut of Stanley Kubrick, and the gathering of these energies with very.
There's also the blackmail element of some of this, right?
Of course, then that is, for example, in the Skull and Bones, the fact that they lay for a whole night inside, this tomb, and they confess all their deeper secrets and their forbidden secrets to a bunch of individuals that then, of course, become your brothers for the rest of your life, because maybe you have told them things that you will not tell even to your, to anybody, to your father and mother even. So. This is how John Kerry, the Skull and Bones, is linked to George W. Bush, the Skull and Bones. Maybe they know secrets about each other, and the blackmail that is connected to those secrets is very important. Mm-hmm. So you have two elements here. You have the magic, the sexual magic, the element, which is very important in specific secret societies, especially it's very important, like the Ordo Templi Orientis that had Aleister Crowley, but it wasn't founded by Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley simply took over this very influential secret society.
And popularized it, right?
Yes, and popularized it, but this was born in Germany and in Austria, and that's where the Illuminati are born. That's where the Rosicrucians are born. That's where certain factions of Freemasonry are born. Germany has... in a way, offered us a lot of the problems that we still have to this day. Yeah. I'm sorry to say that. I mean, we can say that the problems with Germany started at the fall of the Roman Empire, when the barbarians from Germany started to gather power and place their own emperors and started to take over the show. But the actual work that was conducted in Germany up until recently, also when it comes down to the war with Ukraine, the so-called military operation in Ukraine, well, Germany is still a focal point for the Illuminati and for their geopolitical, but also for their knowledge, energy, archives. I mean, in Germany, you have the Fraternitas Saturni. People don't even know what this is, Fraternitas Saturni, but these people practice a form of vampirism and sexual magic, and they were involved even with the famous film Nosferatu, which, that everybody sees from the days of black and white movies, the Nosferatu image that you see, but all that is basically typical of a German culture that has offered us a lot of things that are, of course, beautiful. I mean, I love certain things of German culture. Goethe was a great guy, but Goethe was also an Illuminati. So,
and the Nazis talked about how they wanted to.
I would say the Faustian Pact is also very German.
Yeah.
So if you want to go back to that, the Nazis have made really the Faustian Pact and ended up
summon the dark spirit so that they could have esoteric knowledge, right?
Yes, the Germans, of course, never give up on their practices, occult practices. And so what happened was that in 1912, when they founded the Germanen Orden, The Germanic Order became a way to revive the Volkish and Pan-Germanic ideals. And then, of course, from the Germanic Order, we have the birth of the Thule Gesellschaft, which in turn helped the birth of the Nazi Party, which initially was the DAP party, and then became the national. I mean, it took 1 year for Adolf Hitler to join the secret society and transform the party in what became the National Socialist. But it is, though, very important to remember that in that period, in Germany, there were two factions that were fighting, and one faction would have established Germany as another Soviet Union. A Soviet Germany was actually in the makings. So then people from the Skull and Bones here, like Prescott Bush, started to pump money into the German Nazi cause because they wanted, but telling them, forget about socialism. In fact, there was a moment, and I talk about this also in Volume 7, there is a moment also in which you have Goebbels, who is kind of disappointed by abandoning the socialist communistic ideals for, it's kind of like, why is Hitler abandoned? Because, of course, it was the people behind the scenes, the people who really control everything, said, we need to establish something that opposes the communists in the Soviet Union. We don't need another Soviet Union. We already, but in the period 1919, they had been
also, right.
Was
Don't
it?
they also use them to play against each other to
Yes.
create this dialectical? Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have an opposition. And at the time in 1919, there had been a lot of deaths. A lot of people died because of they tried to establish this Soviet Bavarian kind of briefly lived kind of experience, fortunately, but I don't know if what came after was much better, actually, fortunately. It seems like, but it was the Spartacus League that was called Spartacus League that was promoting the form of communism. And Spartacus was the name of Adam Weishaupt.
Yeah, right. So, that was his name.
And we can say that really communism was very much helped by Adam Weishaupt in the development of this ideology that, there was this Spartacus League, but before that there was also Karl Marx, who himself had written a manifesto within the League of the Just, which was a German organization in France.
It was an offshoot of the Illuminati.
And
the League of the Outlaws, which was an offshoot directly, and then the League of the Just
was basically an offshoot. And then there was, of course, the experience of the French Commune, the fact that then Vladimir Lenin, Trotsky, these people were initiated in France, brought this kind of concept in Russia of a Freemasonry without a God. Because Freemasonry initially was reserved for believers, and it was very strict on that.
Right.
And actually, we can say that before 1813, it was actually reserved for Christians only. It was a way of just unifying the different Christian factions that had been dividing and fighting each other. But then after 1813, then it opened up to all other religions with the simple belief in one God. Now, the problem is that then in the matter of 60 years in France, they started to let people in that were not really even, they didn't even want to associate with the religion in any way. They didn't even believe in God. So they wanted the Bible out of the lodge as volume of the sacred law. And that's when the Grand Orient of France started to let atheists in their lodges, as well as the Grand Lodge de France. They started to promote what became the first, in embryo, what became the socialist communist ideal that unfortunately then spread like a virus, and it's still here to this day. So a guy like Macron,
became the Communist League, and Lenin had based a lot of the Communist Manifesto off of the Weishaupt's Illuminati Manifesto. And
what happened was that in 1905, the Tsar lifted there was a prohibition on Freemasonry and other secret societies to really expand further, and they were trying to restrict them. There had been already some attempts, even prior in the century prior to that, in Russia, some kind of revolutionary attempts. But in 1905, the Tsar said, okay, I give you the freedom to have these secret societies, these Masonic bodies. And so a new one sprang up. And it was the Grand Orient of the Russian people, which helped very much the Bolsheviks and Lenin itself became part of this project, and used Freemasonry to then later on, because what happens is this: usually either you use Freemasonry, like it happened with Mussolini or Lenin, and then after, though, you persecute Freemasonry. Once you have used something and you don't need it anymore. It's like in Germany, no? In Germany, we had the rise of Adolf Hitler and the rise of a system with the SS that wanted to establish their own secret society. They wanted to be the only ones, so they started to persecute everybody else. And then, of course, they took from the various occupied countries all the archives of Freemasonry to enrich their own archives of the SS. Mm-hmm. Thousands of texts were picked up from the temples of Oslo in Norway and other countries that they occupied, in France, in Paris. So they could in turn then enrich their own culture and, of course, foment, but they didn't want to have an opposition of any kind, and they knew that Freemasonry could become dangerous in that way. In Cuba, Fidel Castro made another decision. He decided to integrate Freemasonry with their own country, and so to this day we still have the Grand Lodge of Cuba, and Fidel Castro was a 30-free, Che Guevara was a 30-free, and everybody's happy like that, and it still goes on to this day.
Wow. So it still goes on to this day, but it's in under rebranding, under different names. Is that
no? The Freemasonry in Cuba is.
The Freemasonry does, but I was thinking the extension of the Illuminati.
The Illuminati, they changed the name because it was Adam Weishaupt himself who suggested to change names, and that way you are chameleontic. You can really survive better. No, there was an attempt, and this I write about in volume 7 of my Confessions, to reshape the Order of the Illuminati in the 1880s in Dresden, in following the old system and making it, Order of the Illuminati following Weishaupt's system in a more. But then it didn't work out because it immediately drew the attention of too many people, and so then the OTO was established and it was much more successful, for example, and many other secret societies were established out of that environment. I mean, there is a complex system in which you have secret societies, but then you have also knighthoods that are also.
This is what Plato talked about, how there should be like the Council of Knights that should rule, and they should be that the secret society should work with them to create the intelligence apparatus, and that should be the controlling of society.
Well, I guess that the knights that shaped up, especially though more from the medieval time, were kind of like connected to a system of chivalry that though started to have certain problems with the beginning of the modern era, with the French Revolution. Right. The idea from 1782, there was this convent of Wilhelmsbad in Germany where all the Freemasons of all the systems converged, and they decided to give less importance to the Templar myth, to the knighthood, because it was too much linked to the aristocracy, and they were moving towards a society of bourgeois, a society that basically then abandoned that concept. So the knights are still regarded as important, especially in the Vatican. You have the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, the oldest one. Then you have the Knights of Malta, of course, the sovereign military order, the Knights of Malta. Then you have other knighthoods within the Vatican still to this day that are bestowed upon important personalities. And the Knights of Malta in itself became, because of the transnational stature and also because of the sovereignty independent from the Vatican, an ideal also depository for people from the intelligence services, especially from the Western world, who wanted to have an extra passport, an extra cover-up for their activities.
Exactly. Right.
So I guess that I gave you here kind of a rundown of all the systems that connect the intelligence to the secret societies. I would say that the secret society has a hierarchical structure that makes it ideal, and the fact that then you have within these secret societies then a high college, a collegium, if you want to talk about in the Rosicrucian way, that basically makes it ideal for these people to also go around as sort of noble travelers, meaning that they are very well acquainted with the religious spectrum. If they are real Illuminati of a certain level, then they are acquainted with all kinds of occult, but as well as religious practices. They have an idea, like one of the things that, for example, an Illuminati will do, I just give an example, Aleister Crowley is an ideal figure he immediately, made himself very well versed in Islam. If you go, you become Islamic, you go into the mosque, that was kind of a way of adapting and then being able to use that, the fact you one day you go to a synagogue and become a Jew, the other day you can become a Muslim, the other day they're very versatile. If you are in the intelligence world and you want to survive in certain countries, you have to pull off also that. I mean, when a Muslim sees you as a Muslim, he will tell you things that he will not say to a non-Muslim.
Right.
And that is already an intelligence advantage. If a Freemason sees you as a Freemason, he will tell you things that he will not say to a non-Freemason. That is an advantage. And the same can be said for a priest. So, for example, in the lodges of Freemasonry, but also in certain secret societies that sprang out of Freemasonry, especially in the so-called Illuminati network, if we want to define it as such, there is also apostolic lineages that teach you and actually make you a priest, even a bishop.
I thought that was so fascinating when I started diving into some of the, the origins of psychology and some of these occult origins and secret society. Most of their parents were priests or pastors or, right? They were all in these religious institutions. It was very...
you mentioned Jung. Jung had his main threat, his main fear, actually, was the Jesuits. He saw as black men, and really he had a fear for the Jesuits always in his life. But he then became a member, apparently, of the original OTO that was very much operating in Mount Verita with Theodore Royce. Apparently, he achieved the Rosicrucian degree, but it was more like linked to then the Egyptian rites, the ancient and primitive rites of Freemasonry. And of course, in Jung, we see actually his interest for the Gnostic.
He wrote his dissertation on, and
he also did a book which he never published as Jung in his lifetime, The 7 Sermons to the Dead, which is a kind of a mediumship Gnostic text, which of course didn't come out with his own name during his life, because some people thought maybe he would discredit him to bring out a book like that one that seemed to be, the fruit of channeling and not real. I have it here. It's always very interesting book.
Sure.
But then you have the Red Book that the family didn't even want to bring out, and it's another work that has a lot of esoteric elements in it. When it comes to Jung, he was a little bit divided in his life. Also, his vision of Nazism, which was quite rather positive, and the way that he went, I think, to an Hitler parade, and the way that he actually then though became a tool for the OSS, that then later became
he was Agent 488. That was his number. So he was a double agent. So the OSS and for the United States.
But let's say that his knowledge, his influence, culture, and all the rest, the US wanted to use him. And of course, I guess that he must have worked in this capacity until he died. Of course, it was also the early stages of what became MK Ultra. All his studies also have had a lot of influence. And my father went as a young psychiatrist. He was offered the possibility of directing the Jung Institute. Meyer, who was the main disciple of Jung, offered him that, but he refused simply because he didn't like the way that psychiatry was used to control and to oppress and to take out any political dissidents, even in the West. I mean, it was like, I remember still from, I was a very young person. I was a child growing up with my father, who was discussing with my mother these things, and I didn't really realize immediately why he was abandoning his work as within the realms of psychiatry. But then he made it very clear that he didn't want to have anything to do with people being locked up for political things. It was for him a way. I mean, it was inconceivable, and the overuse of meds that the big pharma was pushing also was inconceivable. And I remember I did some psychotherapy many years ago with a colleague of my father, just so I could have this experience in the early 90s. And I arrived there in this office in Via della Consulta. It was a guy, I think, called Ranzato, who co-founded with my father this GAPA, Association of Young Psychiatrists. And I could see a big jar of Valium and other meds next to him. And I was like, I went to my father and said, this guy this guy is not respecting the basic tenets of what, you're trying to promote here, by doing. And I discussed it with him, and I said, and this Ranzato said, well, and I use it for myself too. I was like, what? I mean, so dragging themselves and stuff. I mean, I was like, these people, of course, by doing that, are simply betraying the original mission, which was not to be, but because in the end, of course, the big pharma is the one that invests, is the one that makes you open clinics, is the one that gives you the big money, it's the one that brings you in lavish holidays if you then, of course, use their medicines. There is and I explained this very well also in volume 8 of my confession. There's an exchange, There is they offer you something. It's not just medicine can become very corrupted because I mean you are you're taking an oath, which as a doctor you should respect, but unfortunately that doesn't it's often not respected, that oath.
Right. Yeah, well, the word psychiatry actually means doctoring of the soul. So, and the psychology was studying the soul. I do now in my research, I've kind of come to the conclusion that they, it's been a way to create a secular or occult practice that takes us away from the spiritual solutions to, some of these problems. I think that's kind of where they've gone with it. And when I look at the origins, it does seem they all have this, they wanted to practice essentially magic. I mean, Freud wanted to do all this telepathy and, it was thought transgressions. Jung was definitely very much into the ancient mystics. And
well, you see, the thing is that there's a main difference here between Jung and Freud. Sigmund Freud was very skeptic towards anything that has an occult or esoteric kind of element. Jung was the complete opposite. Jung was somebody who actually practiced the magic.
I wouldn't necessarily say that that's necessarily true. I think that Freud...
Jung practiced the magic of Abramelin.
Jung definitely, but I wouldn't say that Freud was against it. He was against, he had different perspectives.
First of all, the fact that he made a large use of cocaine and drugs, it's like he was also...
the way the modern psychiatrists prescribe Adderall and Ritalin, that's how he was with the cocaine. He thought it was the magic potion for everything.
I give you the magic potion. And of course, then we have his own sexual deprivation in the mix that becomes part of this whole thing, the libido and all that, So I don't know. I'm very skeptic towards, of course, Freud's point of view. And there was, of course, this breakup between the two because Jung had definitely a different approach.
I think they also had a battle of egos as well, but
I think mainly because Freud wanted to repress any esoteric elements from his studies. I don't have evidence that Freud ever.
This book goes through a lot of Freud's esoteric influences, and it was in the realms of a lot of this. Mind reading, telepathy, what in the intelligence agencies then became
but we will say that is still in the realms of you can describe it as extrasensory powers of some kinds, but we're talking not about entities, and that is something instead that I think learned around Jung, the possibility of something different, of something he will never have gone into the actual practice of the magic of Abramelin. And still to this day, I have people from the medical community that, because they know about my father's work, they contacted me and they asked me more information regarding the actual occult side of Jung, which I discussed in my books. But of course, it's much more evident, and I think that there is, of course, in Freud instead a real intention in manipulation that can be set, through also all these practices that you mentioned. It's very interesting the fact that they made a book about the esoteric influences of Freud, because I think they were probably then interpreted by him in a very pragmatic way.
Right. Well, Freud, both of them were also very influenced by the ancient mystical practices of hypnotism, and incorporated that, of course.
Now, when it comes down to that, we have to go back to Mesmer. And in fact, I mentioned, Mesmer was very influential even for Adam Weishaupt, because actually he was linked to his father and stuff. So, there was actually a direct connection there. Mesmer was the guy who talked about animal magnetism and who laid the foundation of hypnotism as we know it. Right. So I guess that today there is still a lot of people within the occult community, but also the intelligence community that use elements of mesmerism. And in fact, I also remember a guy called Marco Pare who who devised a system of neurolinguistics in France, neurolinguistic free, which was himself a disciple of Mesmer, and the work of Mesmer was very much also important also for people, even for people like Gurdjieff, and the practices. For those who know about Gurdjieff, is another figure that, of course, will require a whole episode to discuss.
Right.
But definitely there is a lot of manipulation that can be made through the knowledge of your own magnetism and the fact that you can build it up and you can work around it. But I think that is also a point that we going back to what we discussed with the sexual magic.
Yeah.
Some of the elements also linked to that magnetism that in the case of Adolf Hitler was built artificially with the knowledge and the secret practices of what Rudolf von Bottendorf brought him from Turkey, known as the practices of ancient Ottoman Freemasonry. They were actually the practice of the Sufi, of the Bektashi sect, mixed with other elements of the Rosicrucians, because the Rosicrucians teach that kind of stuff also.
Right.
All those things you mentioned just now regarding also some of, yes, it's true. Some of those practices, telepathy, they are taught within the Rosicrucians, are part of the. But this practice that was given, this was handed in 1924 to Adolf Hitler during the period of his arrest, because he spent a few months in jail with Rudolf Hess. These practices were very important in order to gather that magnetism that then he relayed in his speeches that hypnotized the masses. I mean, it was a conscious effort that was done. There is this practice that basically is done by identifying the mantra of the Gnostic, I, O, and then reciting it and internalizing until you receive a certain element, a certain color in front of your eyes. And then you are conscious of that magnetism that you are exposing. So Adolf Hitler was conscious about what he was doing. And he was not using any script, any teleprompter like Joe Biden. He was simply channeling the whole thing. And so it was really demonic to extents that we can't even imagine. But it will hypnotize, and it will be literally impossible for then millions of Germans to say no. But without that occult element that was given by Rudolf von Bottendorf himself, linked to the Illuminati and this whole, it would not have been possible. So they gave him the tool, and so aside from the geopolitical and economic interest and Prescott Bush and those people giving him the money, but then there were people giving him also the occult tools to, you know. I think that occult tool is not something that fortunately has been given to Zelensky, who doesn't seem to be hypnotizing anybody, but seems to be pretty much a joke. But
well, that's a good thing. Yes.
They gave him the elements of those Nazi occult elements to build up his own militia, Azov battalion, and all the rest. Actually, so they gave him some stuff, and he's definitely a good candidate for the office of Antichrist. But at the same time, we can also say that
I think he's also a cultural kind of a tool, right? You know, because he was an actor, and he's promoting the whole kind of degenerate culture with the trans movement, right? Presenting himself as the cross-dresser. So
but you can see he doesn't have that magnetism, fortunately, that was very much present in people like Hitler, even Gaddafi had more magnetism than Zelensky, or Saddam Hussein, or I don't know, or people like these people had definitely more magnetism than Zelensky. Zelensky seems to be a guy that is a useful tool that can be useful puppet without any particular, cultural, or he's not proposing anything, incredible here. I mean, he's just simply relaying what they're telling him to relay and just obey to his puppet masters. So thank you so much. I think that for today we did a great job in dealing with the topics that you had put.
Yeah. I actually, can I ask you two quick questions? One is, if you have so one is on, because I know that Wilhelm Wundt, who is known as the father of psychology, his great-grandfather was known as Raphael in the Illuminati. So I'm curious about those ties, if you know anything. And
well, I mean, even Carl Gustav Jung had in his family line members of the Illuminati, worshipper masters of Freemasonry, Rosicrucians, and so on. Now, it's obvious that a lot of people within certain families have these connections, and so they benefit from these connections, from these teachings. Some of them more consciously, some of them less consciously, but definitely it's not like a novelty that I mean in the elite families you have these links, but they were definitely even more evident in Carl Jung, because he had actually an ancestor who was actually called Carl Jung, I think, who was a member, who actually is even confused at times. I mean, he was from a long line family with a very important history within Swiss Freemasonry and also his links with the Illuminati.
Yes. Yeah, so that, and then my other question, and this maybe we can revisit another time because I think it would be a bigger discussion, but I wanted to talk about some of the secret society connection to Tavistock, because I seem to find a lot there. Even the Marquis of Tavistock, John Ian Russell, his grandfather was the founder of Skull and Bones. So there does seem like there's a lot of connections there as well.
I've actually discussed very much this in volume 8 of my Confessions, the connections of Lord Tavistock, a little bit. I tried to explain a little bit where this whole project came out from, but of course they are all Freemasons or members of the British elite. Let's not forget that the British elite is not only Freemasons, but also we had the Hellfire clubs, just so a reminder that it wasn't all very innocent, and it kind of became pretty dark, even for people who were connected to it, like Benjamin Franklin, because still to this day, we don't know why a lot of bodies were found where he was living in England. I mean, we don't want to associate anybody that, of course, has helped in the foundation of this glorious nation, but there is definitely some links of Benjamin Franklin also with the La Loge de Neuf Sources, which was particularly active and linked also with the Illuminati and linked also to Cagliostro. So, I mean, there is definitely some important links. When it comes down, though, to the Tavistock Institute, one thing that I actually experience myself because when I participated to the social unrest known as the Pitchfork Revolution in Italy, which went on for a few months in Italy.
Right.
And it was more or less parallel to what was going on in Ukraine in that moment, from November to February of 2014. The actual problem became so big for the establishment that they had to break into my doors, smash everything, arrest me, lock me up. And I was brought in front of this professor in this mental institute, and he, in front of my lawyer, said, I represent the Tavistock Institute. So at that point, I was like, I have at least, I watched my lawyer, Fisio Bureddo, and I said, well, at least I can write that in my next book, as you are the witness. He's telling you, he's admitting it in front of you that the Tavistock Institute is responsible. So then I said, but how is it possible that they have representatives even here in Italy? And who are they linked to? So then the month after, I was brought by some people who were from the Orthodox Knights of Malta, who had some problems with the Vatican. I was brought up near a castle near Bologna, and they told me that the office of the Tavistock Institute in Italy was actually in the headquarters of a bank in Florence. So I was like, I was with a bank. I was like, what? Wow. I was a little bit shocked about that connection. But basically, the Tavistock created in 1946 with, of course, also the financial support of the usual Rockefeller Foundation, is a tool of the establishment. And this Professor Giuseppe Nicolò, I discovered later on, he was also a member, of course, of the Vatican, the Episcopal Conference, medical board. So, I mean, he was like linked with both the Vatican and the Tavistock all together. And they were literally saying to me, you are finished here. You know, they wanted to ruin me. And unfortunately, they didn't manage to do so, because I managed myself to then counteract this arrest, this whole thing, and get thanks to my own connections. It's a long story, but of course, I'm not here to tell you this story because it would take us too much time. Sure. But in the end, I managed to get out of the, let's say, this whole trap that they had made around me, because their trap was, we can brand him as crazy. His political following will be lost, which they, you know, we take the books off the shelves, which they did immediately. Right. And then we can also take off his way of financing himself, you know? And so this, and then we censor him in every radio and every TV in Italy, because then a friend of mine who was I'm a journalist, so a friend of mine contacted me from the Order of the Journalist and said, your name has been put in a list that we can't mention. So for all the journalists in Italy, there is order not to mention your name and the name of these other two people who participated with me to this pitchfork revolution. So they wanted to ruin me in every sense, and I was capable of instead getting to this guy who managed to sign a document. This was a doctor. He had to be. It was actually a criminologist called Dr. Vento, Antonio Vento, who was a friend of mine, a Templar, who took the responsibility to take me out of their program. Their program was to inject me with lithium every 2 weeks. And so to completely block me from ever writing anything anymore, to be completely brain dead for the rest of my life. And they tried to do that again in 2019, but that's when I left definitely Italy after various threats and stuff, and I managed to arrive here in America, so and change my citizenship, hopefully sooner rather than later, so I can then maybe participate to your future Nashville.
Yes, we're making it a tour, so you will definitely participate in the next one for sure. That would be incredible to have you. So
thank you so much, and God bless to all our viewers, and keep on the great work.
Thank you so much. Yes, if I'll give everybody just one more minute. If anybody wants to put in the donor chat, we will definitely answer any questions you have. Thank you so much to everybody who is watching and who is participating, and thank you so much, Leo, for spending this time with me and for all the work you're doing to disseminate this important information. So I'm really, really grateful. And
absolutely, and keep on, of course, supporting my books, which seem to
here.
Absolutely, which I guess you can find most of what we have discussed today in those books. So you know, and much more, of course, because you know.
Yes. You tell everybody where they can. I have leozagami.com posted under your name, but tell everybody.
Yes, leozagami.com. I try to you know, just publish a number of articles every week to just keep on also. I mean, to spread a different version of reality from my website, a version of reality which is free of censorship, free of the hypocrisies the mainstream, but also with my own interpretation of the current geopolitical events due to my long experience in what people commonly define as the New World Order, which is, I think, now becoming the Old World Order as we are approaching the Sino-Russian, this New World Order, which is an alliance with BRICS and a completely different geopolitical setup, which is coming to life. Sadly, leaving America more and more behind, even in the military industrial complex. The fact they haven't even been able to put together a hypersonic program when the enemy is already using hypersonic missiles in the theaters of war. I mean, this is ridiculous. America used to be at the top of the military also, you know, but they are deliberately sabotaging even their own military industrial complex to make China the number one country in the planet that is, of course, going to work hand in hand with this AI, because no matter what Elon Musk and the others say, I don't think that the Chinese will stop their AI experiments because Elon and the others are, oh, please stop. Let's have 6 months. Right. Yeah, sure. The Chinese will stop.
We'll just relinquish all the power that's been handed to us. Yeah, no problem.
No problem. TikTok is that food that the AI in China needs to become more and more powerful, and we are letting this happen.
I mean, here they use it through Facebook and through Twitter and through all of the other apparatus. So, you know, TikTok is more advanced, certainly, but I think, as you said, China is the model. They use it as the technocratic model to beta test and then to roll out throughout the world.
Absolutely, because there is no way of beating China these days, because democracy as we know it is too weak. We could encounter communism in China, which is now at the moment the most eminent representative of this perverse ideology, in theory only with monarchy, because there should be a monarch fighting a communist dictator. You can't have a democracy that after 4 years has somebody else, and then the guy stays there for 40 years. How can you fight it if every 4 years you change?
Right.
It's not going to work. For us, democracy is a great thing, and it's, of course,
we don't really have democracy anyway. I mean, democracy is
but the republic on which we stand has been built in a way with a constitution that
the constitutional republic, right?
Yeah, the constitutional republic, in a way, it's an example that everybody should follow, but it's something that unfortunately we're not following even ourselves. So
no, we've been completely infiltrated, and we have, as you so brilliantly outlined, through this web and this intricate construct of the secret societies, the intelligence apparatus, and these roundtable organizations they've infiltrated. And so we have the illusion of the constitutional republic.
Well, yes, and nowadays we talk about secret societies, but let's say that from the birth of the roundtable concept with Cecil Rhodes,
Milner,
things have really changed, because we're talking about think tanks, really.
Yep.
That
the Rand Corporation,
open and less secret than they used to be. But then, of course, their projects, their mission, that stays secretive.
Right.
The real influence in world affairs, maybe that stays secretive. But everybody knows every year we have the Bilderberg is meeting, the Davos is meeting, this is meeting. They give you their address.
Relations, the Stanford Research Institute, the Rand corporations,
But while before it was all secretive, and in some, nowadays they are in the open. But if you try to go there is people with machine guns and snipers waiting at the entrance. So it's like all over the city. So it's like, okay, we are open, yeah, fine, we're all nice and dandy, and we propose ourselves very openly. But then in reality, try to get in there, and you are probably gonna be whacked in a second. So,
right.
It's not really like they are being like more open, because this is nowadays the way they operate. But their secrets are still kept in hidden places, and they are not for everybody, that's for sure. In fact, we are gradually destroying America as we know it, just as predicted, and nobody is acting like this is a problem, because the power structure is shifting elsewhere in the world, and it seems it's not a problem for Tim Cook at Apple, who just went to Beijing the other day in an Apple store, and everything is fine, everything is normal, everything is great. And today Europe admitted that they can't actually they can't have no business with China because they will not survive. So what does that mean? It means that now von der Leyen needs to go with Macron to China. It means that if China really begins a war with the West, we are finished. That's what it means,
Right. Which is what they've outlined. Isn't that what Kissinger and Brzezinski, they talked about?
But in fact, I still suggest to read this book, because in volume 7, I really explain a lot of this ambiguity and how the Sino-Russian New World Order is raising. And people, initially when this book came out in February 2022, they thought, oh, well, maybe this book is just, conspiracy theory. Yeah, sure. But unfortunately, everything that is written, including the invasion of Ukraine, it all happened accurately. And the next stage, unfortunately, we know, is the invasion of Taiwan, with all the implications, as the head of the Taiwanese president is present here in America. But it's like even Honduras, I think, retired. They gave up on having any diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Nobody, when China is gonna move into Taiwan, that's gonna be the beginning of the end, sadly, if we don't react immediately. But politically speaking, we don't have giants anymore. We have just people who write the speeches with ChatGPT. We have a bunch of idiots. So I find it very difficult with the present culture and political milieu. Even the conservative one in this country, it's not strong enough.
Right, which is why it's so important that people read your work and really understand this material. I'm so grateful for the time you spent with me today. For everybody who's watching, I'm going to do a little promo. You can go to rebelsforcause.com and join us in Nashville, because we are going to have an event, Artists for Liberty. It's the Cause Fest, which is creative artists uniting for the sovereignty of everyone. Leo's definitely going to join us in the next one. We're going to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think that we should brighten up the day simply by saying that, you are still capable of building your own micro community here in the United States. And that might be the only option to oppose more and more this federal invasion of our reality, which is sad to see. You have the FBI acting like the Stasi of East Germany. Then it's so I think that the micro community, the idea of not relying anymore on them and just simply living our own reality separately, but that means in turn that one day we will have to give up on using the internet, on using all these things that they have offered to us. So we are living on borrowed time when it comes down to this technology, because it's in their hands, unfortunately. But in the meantime, we can build an alternative reality somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Courtenay. God bless you all.
You too. Thank you so much.
All the best.